Apprentice to the Villain. I cannot explain how much fun I had reading this book. Assistant to the Villain was the first book, if that sounds familiar. There was a really popular TikTok series where the author of the book was originally doing skits saying, this is what I think it would be like if I was the morally gray fantasy villain's personal assistant. And then it was essentially a grumpy sunshine love story with a lot of magical elements and stuff like that. And I really enjoyed those videos. So when it became a book series, I was so thrilled. And honestly, I have had such a great time reading these. The next one comes out next week. That hardly ever happens when I finish a book, and I don't really have to wait that long. Usually when I talk to people about this book, I tell them it's more on the fairy tale side of fantasy. There's magical creatures, including one of my favorite creature characters, I guess, a frog named Kingsley, which is why you'll be seeing frogs this entire video. This is the second book in the series, so if you're completely new to this, the assistant to the villain is about a very happy-go-lucky main character who sort of stumbles her way into becoming an assistant for the villain of the land, except she's very good at it and the villain is very lovable. If you're looking for like a big war story or like some sort of fight story, like if you're looking for like a Mistborn or Throne of Glass type of fantasy, this is not the vibes. If you're looking for something that is fun and cozy, this is the vibe. It's also, in my opinion, very funny, which I love in a book. If you can get me to laugh out loud while I'm reading, like I'm having a great time. And I had that multiple times reading this one. If you have not read Assistant to the Villain and Apprentice to the Villain, it is now your time to exit. I have many things that I want to discuss. Goodbye to non-spoiler people. We started off with a bit of a flashback from the villain or Tristan's point of view when Evie Sage started coming to work for him, and Kingsley is over there holding up a sign that says pretty, and the villain says, "You think I don't know that?" And Evie overhears him and she's like confused about what he's talking about. And it's little moments like that where the villain is trying to cover up the fact that he really likes Evie, that it's so cute. Like I love it so much. I've always liked Grumpy Sunshine trope, I think, but like never to this extent. And I was just like every time they were talking, I was just so like fangirly. I had such a great time. However, the actual pickup of the main story is at the end of the previous book, the villain got taken, and Evie knows that there's like basically like a warrant out for her, except it's fine if she's dead. I don't know what that's called. But she decides that her way to get into the palace, because the king has captured the villain, she's gonna play dead. And in order to do that, she's going full Romeo and Juliet. She takes this like star fruit thing that like genuinely will kill you if you don't get the antidote in time. And I knew this was gonna happen. I was so proud of myself for predicting. She gets rolled in. She looks dead. And the villain loses it. He's like in this, I imagine it as like a giant meeting room, and he's down in the center getting judged or whatever. And they roll out Evie, who looks like a corpse, and he is so unwell. And he's basically like, I have nothing left at this point, because Evie really does mean so much to him, even though he can't fess up to it to her face yet. We got to hear from Becky in this book more, which was really fun because I love her and Blade together. Oh, that's right. So it wasn't necessarily like a judgment. It was more of an unmasking of the villain, because nobody knows what he looks like. And so King Benedict's going to take off his mask, and it's going to be very dramatic. And Becky is there with Blade and is trying to help Evie. And when she sees that Evie is still dead in this coffin, she's like, this is wrong. Like something went wrong and Evie's actually going to die. And she's trying to figure it out. And meanwhile, we have King Benedict telling the people that there's this like basically a fairy tale called Renadon's story. And he's like, it's actually a prophecy. And if we don't manage to follow this story, then the entire kingdom is going to cease to exist. And a big part of that is the Givrays, however you say it. It's the dragons. And Benedict has everybody convinced that the villain has had them captured for the last like 10 years. And that's the reason that the land is losing its magic, when actually it's King Benedict who's causing all these problems. And then he's also convinced everyone that the villain is the reason for the magic illness. It seems like that's kind of how they're losing magic in this land. But like Benedict's the whole cause of it. He's just pinning it on the villain. And so then we're all paying attention to the villain. It's like pan over to empty coffin, because Evie Sage has escaped. It's right at this moment when Benedict is about to pull the mask off of the villain that Tristan is like, Benedict, you're playing this role really well, the role of the villain, because Benedict is the villain in this story, even though the villain himself would probably like never admit that. But then we like kind of visually pan over to where Evie's supposed to be dead in this coffin, and she's not there anymore. It is important to note that right before this, Tristan was sort of like trying to tell her, wake up, like I command it as your employer, because he has that like the tattoo it's on his arm, but it binds to Evie's pinky, and it was supposed to be what he told her it was like an employment agreement thing, but in reality it tells him when she's in danger, and he's like, why, if she's dead, the tattoo should be like disappearing or something like that, and it hasn't. And so he's trying to like basically talk down the bond, like to wake her up. And when we find out later that he actually did that, and it's because it has to be like true love or whatever, and it wasn't because Gideon, Evie's brother, who was like part of the guard, was supposed to get her the antidote, and he didn't get to her in time. So she really was gonna die. And the only way you can live without the antidote is this like true love bond. I love when Evie like steps out and reveals herself and stuff, and right before she's about to basically get arrested, she kind of signals the malevolent guard, which is the villain's army basically, and they all kind of like step out from the crowd. It's like mostly women, so they've been disguised and stuff like that, and then they come out and they start to like attack. And Evie, the thing is, she can be kind of brutal, but she's so sweet about it, and she kind of looks at the king and she's like, I did try to warn you, before they all like jump into action and stuff. Okay, so we're like in the middle of this massive fight scene, and the villain is like, Evie, unmask me, because he's still got his mask on. And she's like, no. And he's like, you kind of basically exposed herself to the public. Like, she's now a known face. He's like, why would I not do the same thing for you? It's very sweet, very cute, unnecessary, but they do it anyway. First of all, when we're fighting in the castle, Kingsley, my favorite, pops out. And Tristan's like, what is Kingsley doing here? And Evie's like, he likes cream puffs. It's so cute. And they go back to Massacre Manor. And Evie can see this weird gray fog. And she's like, what is that? And Tristan's like, what the heck? Because that's his magic and no one can see it except for him. And now Evie. This is also when Kingsley attacks Benedict and bites him. She's like, Kingsley, remember what I showed you? And he bites down on the king, and it's so funny. To escape, she ends up grabbing the villain, and they run and jump off a cliff right onto Fluffy. It's very cinematic. It was so cute. So now that we know that we don't want to follow Renedon's story, the villain is like, we should separate the dragons, because if they have a baby, that's like part of the story, and we definitely don't want this to happen. And Blade's like, about that. And so we know that we can't have the dragon give birth like in captivity. It'll mess with fate or something like that. I didn't fully understand this little bit of the magic, but I feel like you don't have to understand every single detail of this. However, we don't know how long Givrays are pregnant. We have no idea. It could be 6 weeks, it could be 6 months, it could be 6 years. We have absolutely no idea. And Blade's like, I will get on researching that ASAP. And we can't just let them go, because then Benedict will try and get them and then just blame the villain for the Guvrays being in captivity. And so in Renedon's story, we have this mention of the unmasked villain and their malevolent dark, for nothing is more dangerous than a black and good heart. However, reading it towards the end, I was kind of like, is Evie the villain in this? And then the villain himself, Tristan, is he the malevolent dark? Because he's a good person, but he has this dark magic. And so like, I think we're gonna get more of this in the next book. However, Evie's like, if we fulfill this prophecy, then you become like ruler of all the land, and we don't have to deal with Benedict anymore. So they're talking about in the last book, while the villain was imprisoned, Evie did manage to hang the head of that Orson Warren person who had attacked her. But what I liked the most about this scene was Tristan's power was kind of floating around and sort of like against Evie, like very, very cat. I imagined it like a shadow cat. Sage eyed it, then gave his death magic a little wave like it was a blasted newborn. It's not good because Tristan isn't controlling it. Normally, his powers would be completely under his control, but they're not, and I think that's part of the prophecy, maybe? He has to like bring his magic back in, and part of it might be because he's so comfortable around Evie that his powers feel more at ease and just kind of move around, maybe. I love this. He's trying to basically like get caught up, and Evie had recently mentioned that she was knitting, and he's like, so let me see if I have this correct. You killed Otto Warson, crafted and executed a plan to smuggle every woman in my malevolent guard into the king's castle, faked your own death, and rescued me with a nearly flawless escape. Did I leave anything out? And she's like, the knitting. However, despite the fact that he's actually very, very proud of Evie, he's really worried. And I understood it, but I was like, you know, Evie stuck around because she does have a dark streak in her. But he feels like he's corrupting her, and he doesn't like that. And he's like, she's such a such a light. Like, she's so kind and sweet. And he's like, if she stays with me, the villain, the bad guy, for super long, then that's gonna go away. And he doesn't want that to happen to her, and I do understand, but I'm like, do you not see that you're just, like, actually quite sweet? Like, I know the villain's got his issues, and he's got to work through stuff, but I was like, I don't think you understand. Like, if you really look at your own personal tendencies, you're not, like, I mean, he does murder people, I guess, but he's not that bad. So our next problem arises, and that is that Massacre Manor is becoming visible to the outside. It's normally, you can be in the forest and you would not be able to see it right now. It's so funny, like visually hilarious, where little pieces of it are starting to become visible. So like there's like a door and a window just floating in the sky, which is, you know, enough to give away their position. So that's bad. There were so many times where the two of them were like so close to getting together. One of those times was like really funny where like they fight, but it's cute. And he's saying, you are the most frustrating person I've ever met, and I work with hardened criminals and interns. But before they can, they end up like falling through this cloud thing. They're on a quest, and they end up in front of this creature, and he is part of Renadon's story. And the problem with the rhyme is that theoretically the people who end up in front of him are going to become his next meal. And Evie's like, do you think he's married to that ending? However, one thing that Evie's always going to do is be nice to a point that she can get herself out of anything. She's sort of like complimenting the monster and stuff like that. Apparently he's the one who created trees. The creature does not like the villain, but he likes Evie, and they need a vial of stardust from him. Like, he's the only one who can give it to them, and we want to use it to find Evie's mom, because she's also like part of this prophecy situation. And so they're telling the creature that they want to fulfill Renadon's story, and he's like, you want to fulfill the story Tristan Maehrer, because he says his full name, and the villain's like, how do you know my name? And then the creature says, it took you long enough. So he's been waiting for like a while. One like kind of side note at this point in the story is that the creature says, he's like, oh, I'm one of the gods who made this world, the other ones have left, and he has like, it's sort of like in his cave, but there's like a missing piece, and it looks like a piece of the sky is missing. He says the reason that happened is because like humans have become greedy and they're starting to manipulate magic in a way that they shouldn't be. At this point, the creature calls Evie the daughter of wishing stars. And then Tristan's like, why do you let people kind of portray you as this monster? And then the creature's like, well, you know as much as I do that people will twist their own narratives into what they want to see. And he's like, you would know that better than anyone. And I'm like, yeah, exactly, because you're not like a bad person, Tristan. And then the villain says, for what it's worth, I don't think you're a monster. And it's very sweet, and I feel like it's a moment that Tristan needed to have to sort of kind of begin his journey to believing that he is maybe a good person. Okay, so we're in a fight with the king's guards. And there's one guard who has the villain and is like, has him in a position that he can kill him. And then the other guards are yelling like, kill the villain. And the guy says no. And then he takes off his helmet, and Evie's like, her informant is here at last. And I was like, who is this? I've been wondering since the last book, because at the end of the last book we had one of those like the king's guards. Between the ones who ran away and the ones who got killed, there was one other guard who kind of let Evie go. And it was very confusing, and I thought it was Blade Undercover, but then it wasn't Blade Undercover. And now the villain is freaking out because Evie like jumps at this guard and hugs him and stuff like that. and then Kingsley's in the background with his sign. He's like, uh-oh. And then Evie introduces this guard as her older brother, Gideon. And Tristan's like, I am so pathetic. No, you're just in love. It's okay. Turns out that her brother, because remember, we thought that her brother was dead because her mom like exploded with magic in that field, and we thought it killed Gideon in the process, but it didn't. It just took away his memory, and then he ended up in the king's guard, and as memories were slowly coming back to him, he remembered his family, but he didn't go back because he didn't really see a way out, basically. I feel like it was a little frustrating. And Evie, like, confronts this with him, and she's like, why did you not come back for us? Why didn't you let us know that you were okay? And at this point, Gideon's like, I just want to help. But we don't fully trust him. Evie's still very hurt that he never showed up because, like, really, the entire responsibility of the family fell on her. And to an extent, Gideon didn't come back because he just didn't want to. He could have. One thing that I really liked was that Lissa, Evie's little sister, has kind of become Rebecca's assistant. And she also wants to be evil. Like, she wants to be like the villain. And she wants to be like her older sister. And it's really, really cute. Evie has lost her journal, and she asked Rebecca to keep an eye out for it. And she also told Lissa. And Lissa's like, I can't find it anywhere. And then the villain walks out of his office holding his journal. And it's so funny. funny because Evie has drawn a picture in her journal that looks very much like her and the villain kissing, except Evie's not the best artist, so it's not like necessarily immediately obvious what the drawing is. It's like the villain recognizes her and he's like, who are you kissing? Gideon says it looks like Terrence, like a guy from their hometown or whatever. The villain did not appreciate that at all, but Evie doesn't want to own up to what it is. Now, we have that vial of stardust from the creature that we picked up along the way, and we're going to use it to like basically sprinkle it over a map and find Evie's mom to help fulfill this prophecy. However, Evie's exhausted, so she goes to sleep and she has the vial of stardust like in her dress or whatever, and then when she wakes up it's not there anymore. She ends up running into the boss who has it because this vial has become its own entity, like it has its own personality and it's animate and stuff like that. Tristan says that it rolled into his room like it had an appointment, and then it burst out of the room like it was an escaped criminal. Side note, Evie says that she hasn't had dinner yet. Then the villain is like, yeah, all the stuff that we need, these letters that we're gonna shake the dust over, Becky gave them to me, they're in my bedroom. And Evie's like, let's go. And then she's like, oh, wait. Okay, we get into the villain's bedroom and he has a flashlight that looks like a tornado, and he calls Evie Little Tornado because she's like kind of chaotic. And the villain says it was the only one left at the shop. So funny. Under the light of the fire, Evie's entire gown is like basically sheer because it's like a nightgown. And the villain's not doing well, is he? And it's so funny. His internal monologue always gets me. I am malicious. I am evil. I am feared. But she's like just so beautiful. He's like, I am going to die. And when she asks if he's all right, she sees him staring at her. She's like, are you okay? And he's like, just thinking about death. While she's in the room, Tristan gives her dinner. And we find out later that he cooked the whole thing. It was so cute. And then also Evie finds that Tristan saved the scarf that like she cleaned for him on her first day of work, I think, or something like that. It's so cute. It's so cute. We end up tracking down Evie's older cousin because we think that she might know where Evie's mom is. I forgot to say, like up until like 10 minutes ago, we thought that Evie's mom was dead. And so when we find this girl, Helena, she tells Evie, like, I saw your mom and she was not well. And then the weirdest thing happens. So we have gone into this, it's sort of like its own, I don't know, island of a town, pretty much. And to get in, Evie had to answer a riddle, despite the fact that she had accidentally smelled a flower that makes you extremely drunk. And she managed to solve the riddle because the keepers of this little island thing said that Evie had to solve it. And everyone was very concerned that she wasn't going to, but she managed it. And then to get in, the villain had to leave his magical powers behind, which I didn't know you could do that, but he did. And as soon as we get in there, we get captured by these people, and we're like, oh, they're going to turn us into King Benedict. And then Helena finds us, and she's like, oh, that's my cousin. And Evie's like, what is going on here? Like, you wouldn't sell me out, right? Like, we're cousins. And she was like, no, these aren't actually guards. They're actors, sort of like method actors. And we wanted to, like, capture people. I was a little confused about this part, honestly. But it's like a playhouse. And she's like, but I own the playhouse. And Evie's like, great, please let us go. And she's like, no. And they throw them in this like dungeon, even though they're actors. I was like, what are we doing? I'm so confused. Meanwhile, back at the castle, we're with Becky, and she is dealing with all of the interns, and she ends up physically fighting one to make him apologize. And Blade is standing over there just like, so impressed. He's like, where did you learn to fight like that? Which honestly, yes, I didn't really see that necessarily coming from Becky. She's basically Angela from The Office. When Becky fights like that, Gideon recognizes her, and then he kind of like teases her for it because he knows who she really is, because she's like kind of undercover. And then Blade sees this, and it's really upsetting because she knows that Blade sees Gideon kind of poking fun at her and sees it as like Gideon likes her, and she's like, I just have to let him believe the wrong thing because she doesn't want Blade to know who she really is. And I was like, Becky, you've taken a turn for the unpredictable. I didn't see any type of this side story happening whatsoever. Back with Evie and the villain who are locked up, they're having like a Tangled moment where the water is rushing in. It's like gonna flood their cell and they can't get out. They're trying so hard to get these keys, and Evie's like, why are you not using your magic? Because he doesn't have it to handle this situation. Claire and Tatiana come and save us, but not before. We really do think that, like, they think they're gonna drown. And then Evie, kind of like as a final wish, asks the villain to kiss her, And he almost does. And I was like, thank goodness. And then the villain like has this moment where he's like, oh, she's just still drunk from the flower, and I'm not gonna kiss a drunk person because that's not really her asking. And I was like, she's like 99% sober and has wanted to kiss you forever. And I just want her to say, I mean, I get where the villain's sweet and he's trying to be like chivalrous, and I was like, this is so frustrating because he then turns her down and Evie's like, oh my gosh, rejected, and it's really upsetting. But when Claire and Tatiana come in, Helena's actors still have the villain, and Evie is like, that's mine, like talking about him. And it's really upsetting because in her mind she's like, actually maybe not mine because he didn't want to kiss me. And this is when Evie Thor hammer grabs her dagger, because one of the actors had the dagger up against Tristan, and the scar, if you remember the one she got from Otto Warson, it starts to like flow rainbow magic, I think, and then she's able to get the dagger back. And like, I feel like we never really came back to this. I was like, clearly you have magic. Something is going on here that's not normal, even for people in this world, like where magic is assumed, and it's not like out of the ordinary for magical things to happen. People don't have powers like that unless they have a power. And so I feel like we didn't really come back to this, that she has some sort of magical connection with the dagger, and also she potentially might just have magic herself. So we make this connection that Gideon knows that there's a painting that was in their house growing up, and there was a frame around it, and apparently Evie's mom left a note that's like, basically, if I go missing, this is who I'm with. And the best connection we can get is that the frame around it, we know who sells those frames. And so we're like, this person, whoever makes the frames, might know where her mother is. And so to do that, they need to go back into Evie's hometown and go find the vendor. However, the villain doesn't want Evie to come. And I think for the most part, he's worried about her safety because she has been unmasked. They've both been unmasked at this point. But more people are going to know Evie's face, like kind of automatically. And it's rough because he makes it official that she's not going with him to find the vendor. And he specifically says, you aren't needed for this. And she gets like, like scary calm and leaves. And then Blade comes after her. And Blade's so sweet. He's such a sweet friend to her. And he's like, well, you're not okay right now. Why don't you come with me? And they go and they visit the Gouvres. And he says the boss was unwise for not letting you go because she would be valuable to this mission. Evie she just feels really upset because she like got rejected. And now, the boss isn't letting her do her normal missions with him, and she thinks it's all tied together. And so she's like, I'm gonna show him how unwise it was to not let me go, because she has her own plan. She goes to this same festival where the vendor is gonna be as the villain, like they both have the same plan. And she gets down there and she finds this lady who does face paint and stuff, and so she knows it's Evie. She also knew that the villain was the villain. And they both went to her for face paint to like cover up during this festival so they can kind of like be undercover sort of. When the villain finds her, he is so angry that she's there. So they go back to Evie's house because she remembers that the frame that they were looking for, she knows that there was a portrait, and since the frame vendor didn't know Evie's mom like at all, they think that it's the girl in the picture. And they're gonna go look for that. And then they end up in her childhood bedroom, which, first of all, Evie only has one pillow, which is like hilarious because the villain had like 10 throw pillows on his bed. Tristan was like, oh, we should check your bedroom first because he thought it'd be funny to go like poke around basically. And it's so funny. Like they have so much fun together and it's so cute. And I was so frustrated with the villain because he's like, oh, I'm not good for Evie. I'm like, obviously, like she loves you. Like, what are we doing here? And at one point he ends up opening one drawer and Evie freaks out, accidentally pulls out like something lacy and stuff, and he drops it. And she's like, my undergarments are not going to detonate. One can never be too careful. They sort of do have it out a little bit because Evie's like, why didn't you want me to come? Like, why didn't you want me to help? She's like, did you really think that I was going to be a problem? And he says that he didn't think she was going to be a problem. He was worried about her safety because she's now a wanted woman. And the villain, to himself, acknowledges that that was just like a cover-up for the fact that she really distracts him. One thing I do really appreciate about Evie is that she is going to confront the problem, and she says like, you rejected me, and he says that no, I wasn't going to kiss you when the request was made under duress, and Evie doesn't let it go, which I just really appreciate. Like, this could have gone to the miscommunication trope so quickly, which I hate, and it didn't. And she's like, why are you trying to confuse me? You always pull back. And she like kind of states it out in the open. Are you pretending to care about me and then you pull the rug out from under me? And he's like, I'm not pretending. And he gets really mad, but it's like a good kind of mad, because then he kind of like stalks after her for a little bit. He's like, I do care about you. And then he finally kisses her, and it's wonderful, delicious. And then at that moment, Evie tells him it came true, and he knows what she's talking about, because on her first night there, she wished on a wishing star. And Tristan asked her, what did you wish for? And she's like, I'll tell you when it comes true. And that was it. All right, we go and visit Evie's dad, and it is infuriating. He is in the dungeon under Massacre Manor, and she goes and talks to him. She's been like putting it off for a really long time, and he's not being helpful about like what King Benedict wants to do and stuff like that. And then he says, if you'd like answers to what the king and I did to your mother's magic, perhaps you should ask your brother. I think we've all had a hard time trusting Gideon up to this point. He seems like he wants to atone, and he wants to be there for Evie and Lissa and stuff like that, but his motives don't seem like completely clear. Nothing crazy happened this book, but I'm still worried we're gonna get like a betrayal in the next book. While Evie is talking to her dad, the villain is standing outside with Gideon, and Kingsley pops out. Gideon and Tristan are talking, and he says, I see why she likes you. And the villain says that, Evie likes everyone, and Gideon says no. The villain's like, well, you don't really know her well enough to make that judgment call, basically. And Gideon says, maybe not, but she's not afraid to disagree with you, which means she trusts you not to turn on her, and that's like a big part. And then the villain says, she trusts you. Why in the Deadlands would he tell me that? Then Evie comes running out, covered in blood, and Evie storms Gideon. And then by the time Tristan pulls her back, he's like, you're covered in blood. And she's like, it's not mine, it's fine. But this kind of makes him worry about, again, feeling like he's corrupting Evie. But she's mad because, like, their dad just said that Gideon was the reason their mom almost died and had all these issues with her power and stuff like that. And Gideon says, it is my fault what happened to her losing control of her power. I tampered with her magic for the sake of the kingdom, for the sake of the knighthood, and then I destroyed her. And it's this star magic, and Gideon was asked to use his magic to suppress their mom's magic. And he used his magic on her every night to do that, but then one time he like fell asleep, and when all of her big power came back kind of surging through her and there wasn't that damper on it anymore, that's when they thought that she died through this like powerful explosion. Like the next day, there's a fire, and apparently Lissa has helped the dragon learn how to breathe fire. And Evie, she's like getting pulled in a lot of different directions, and this is like one of those moments where we really see how much of a parent she is to Lissa. Tatiana and Claire come out, and they're also mad at Lissa, and Kingsley like dives over them and has this sign like, innocent. Evie says, not likely. What did you do to them? And Lissa locked the two of them in a cupboard. And Lissa says she was trying to help them fall back in love. And then she says, I wanted to do it with Miss Airing, Becky, and Blade too, but sometimes it's hard to tell if she actually likes him. And Claire and Tatiana have not been together for a long time. Lissa would not super have known that, but Claire is like, oh, with us it's so obvious. And then the villain is like, Claire, do you have pink lipstick on? Because that's Tatiana's like signature color. Oh, also we found out that the girl in the picture with Evie's mom was named Renna Fortis, and we bring that up, and then Becky goes real pale, and she's like, Renna Fortis is my mother. And she didn't really want to bring that up. She didn't want to bring up her old family. Like, she'd been running from her past identity, but she knows, like, if we're going to save the entire land, she probably needs to tell them about her family. I love this. So we're on our way to go see Becky's family, but we find a flyer. It's so, like, tangled when they pull down the flyer. And Evie has her own flyer. The villain thinks she's really sad about it, but she's so excited because the last thing that she's, her crimes that are listed is Apprentice to the villain. And she's like, they promoted me. She's like, this is so exciting. I'm practically on your level now. And the villain says, not quite, Sage. And it's so cute. And he says, you're merely an apprentice. You have a ways to go before you're a villain. And that's like partly like kind of joking, but kind of serious, is if this prophecy, if Evie's the villain in the prophecy, then, when does she get promoted to villain? Like, when is she at the point where she becomes part of this? Now, I do remember that Becky's grandmother had the mystic illness, so when we run into Becky's older brothers, they do mention that their grandmother's going to be happy to see her. But, like, as soon as Tristan steps into this, like, I don't know, like basically a study library or something, the bookcase opens and like pulls him and grabs him in. And this is something that happens when you enter the Fortis mansion, because Becky's like apparently very rich, and they have this enchanted house situation. And so now the villain's been pulled into the trench, which seems to be like a test that you go through if you want to be in the Fortis mansion. When he ends up like pulled into this thing, he says he feels something plop on his foot, and it's Kingsley. Kingsley, you are killing me. There's like this kind of like creature of light sort of there, and it asks, is that a frog? And he picks Kingsley up. He's like, you can have him if you let me leave. The man says that the villain's probably not going to leave at all. I don't understand. Like, to me, it was like a dungeon with a sort of viewing area, because two of Becky's brothers are up there, and they introduce themselves, and one of the brothers, Reed, is like, you're looking for a star. And the villain says, no, I'm looking for a woman, because the woman who has the star power is Evie's mom. And Reed goes, aren't we all? And they tell Tristan, you have to pass this test to get out of the trench. And he's like, what if I don't pass? And they say that you die. Evie and Rebecca are talking to Evie's mom, and we're worried about him, but like not at the moment. We're talking to Rebecca's mom though, and Evie is like, where is my mother? And Rebecca's mom is kind of like putting it off, and Becky's pressing the issue. And so Becky's mom is like, you know, have nice manners or whatever. And then Blade steps in and he's like, your daughter has really nice manners. She's like the best person ever. And he says to Becky's grandmother, introducing himself, says, Blade and Gushikin Lady Fortis of the Gleaming City Gushikins. The last name's killing me. But then Rebecca's like, Bladen? Like, and then Rebecca's mom is like, oh, a politician's son for a partner. And then that's when Becky is like, he's not my partner. And then Blade is like, yet. I was like, thank you, Blade. Perfect. Excellent delivery. The reason Becky left was because obviously her grandmother has the mystic illness, and so Becky's mom was pretty desperate to find a cure. And Becky, being the heir to like the power of that family, her mom sort of like signed away her free will, and she was like, if you find a cure and heal the grandmother, then I will give you my like use of my daughter's power. Like, you basically like signing away Becky's agency, and that's why she left. And it sort of seems like we get this hint that there's a memory plant and it can be used to siphon power. And so maybe she was trying to take the power away from her. But we get interrupted because the brothers come in. They're like, hey, your boss is dying. Like, he's not going to pass this test. Meanwhile, there's like a hallucination Evie happening with Tristan right now. And this is when he realized that he loves her. And then this like simulation Evie comes up and is like, if you destroy the Fortis family, then we can be together. And the villain knows that Evie would never do anything like that. And there were several moments like kind of before this where he's like, no, that's not like her. That's not like her. And then he realizes this is not the real Evie Sage. And then this simulation is like, the real Evie would never want to be with you long term. Stay here, essentially die. And you can be with fake Evie. And he says, I would sooner take the scraps she lay at my feet than commit myself to a cheap imitation. Evie shows up. And she's there to help him. And they're talking to this like kind of like creature of light. It's destiny, essentially. Evie's kind of trying to give up herself, and the villain won't let her. And he's like, I'm evil. I've killed countless people, tortured a dozen more. And basically says like, I shouldn't pass this test of goodness. Evie should. And Evie says he's like a teddy bear that got hold of a kitchen knife. The destiny creature is like, stop arguing. I forgot how tiring humans can be. You already passed. I was like, okay. A little anticlimactic, but I'm happy with where we ended up. Evie's talking to Becky. Becky and Evie finally become friends in this book, by the way. A little begrudgingly, but they're talking, and Evie's like, you know, I feel really bad because clearly you were meant to be the villain's assistant. That would have been the next, you know, step in your career progression. And Becky's like, just so we're clear, before he met you, there was no assistant position. And Evie's confused because she's like, he was searching for an assistant for like a really long time. And Becky's like, Evie, before he met you, the only thing that man was searching for was quiet and solitude. And it's so cute because the villain's like kind of knocked out at this moment, and he comes to just enough to be like, stop telling her things. Becky's older brothers are teaching Evie how to fight. And one of them's like kind of flirting with her, and the other brother says something along the lines of like, it wouldn't make sense for somebody to love the villain. It'd be so difficult. And then Evie says, I didn't find it difficult at all. And then the villain, I mean, he's standing right there, and everybody's basically getting up to leave so that they can have a conversation. Becky says there's a very brave person standing here, and it's not the villain. And he kind of turns his attention to Evie, and he asks if she's okay. And at this point, Evie really does think that, you know, the villain doesn't love her like she doesn't think he does. But she says, do you mean am I embarrassed of unrequited feelings? No, I am not. And since all I am to be is your apprentice, then I demand that my learning begins now, because he's going to teach her how to fight. I love a good fight teaching scene. And then he has her like in a hold or whatever, and he's like, how would you get out of this? And then she kisses him to like distract him and like catch him off his guard. He's like, that wasn't what I had in mind. She's like, but it worked. And then it's like pan to the forest where there's like all these valiant guards, and they're like, save one for us, sweetheart. And now we have to fight. Meanwhile, back at the manor, there's also valiant guards showing up to like attack the manor because they can see it now. And this was the moment where I was like, Gideon, if you turn and go to the side of the valiant guard, I'm gonna lose my mind. And then go back to where Evie and Tristan are fighting, and there's like an arrow going directly for Tristan's heart, and so Evie jumps in front of it. There's not a way that she's gonna die, but at the same time I was very stressed out. And then the arrow breaks in two when it hits her, like she became super strong or something like that. And I was like, yet another instance of her having this like crazy magical ability. Like, why are we not discussing this? We go back into the house, and there's that memory flower again, and then Evie is like hearing her mother's screams. It's very much like Catching Fire arena. And then Becky turns to her mom and she's like, enough of this, like what is going on? And then finally, this woman like admits that Evie's mom is dead. She's not, but she thinks she is, which is like, it's rough. The ride home is rough. We get there and everyone's fighting, and the female Gouvray gets taken, which means that if she has her baby in captivity, like that's not good for anybody. We end up fighting the Valiant Guard off, kind of like against all odds at that point. Evie does some fighting, Tristan does some fighting. It's really great. And then it's like a moment of victory where we're like, we won. And then Evie's dad escaped while all of this was happening. And it's because Lissa let him out. And I know it's not her fault. She's a little kid and her dad was like manipulating her basically. And the reason she let him out was because their dad got a note to her, but he was in prison. So like, who slipped her the note? And that's kind of like a question in the back of our minds right now, is like, there's somebody who's a traitor among us who wanted Griffin to get out of jail. So a couple of things. Tristan has not told Evie that Destiny creature said that he was destined to like destroy Evie basically. And then we say that Kingsley used to be a person. I thought this was cleared up. I thought Evie knew this. Apparently everyone thought that Evie didn't know this, and she was like, yeah, kind of figured it out. You call him by a different name sometimes. Everyone talks to him like he's a person. And the villain asked why she didn't say anything. She was like, I didn't want to be rude. Like, y'all seem to enjoy this fact that like I thought he was really just a frog. Here is where we got the official words from Destiny. You were always supposed to meet Evie Sage, Tristan Maehrer, just as Evie Sage is meant to be your downfall and you her undoing. So they're like gonna destroy each other according to this, which never believe that. Like there's something more going on here. Maybe his downfall as the villain means that Evie's gonna become, the villain, which I could see that happening. The tea party, Evie's trying to like not be in love with Tristan. Tristan's trying to not be in love with Evie, and he's having a tea party with Lissa, and it's so cute. And Lissa's like, no, Lord Tristan, you must pour for Miss Halloway first. And Evie asks who is Miss Halloway, and Kingsley lifts a foot and points to a doll. And Evie's like, this is the line for Tristan, he's not gonna do this. And then he pours the doll a cup of tea, and it's so cute. And I have to read this. As Tristan Maehrer, evil overlord, in his large, ridiculously frilly hat, picked up the flowery teapot and poured the tea, saying with a sternness that made her heart twist all over again, my sincerest apologies, Miss Halloway. I usually have better manners. So cute. What are you supposed to do with that? And this is normally where a book goes into the miscommunication trope, and I get really frustrated. I'm so worried we were going here. However, Evie sees right through him. She's like, there's a reason he's like trying to keep distance from me, and he's trying to like push me back, because he's like, don't start this, because she's kind of like flirting with him a little bit. And she says, worry not, it's already begun. And then like her thoughts are like, he's petrified, like he's scared of something, and she can see it. Thank goodness. So she knows that like something's wrong with Tristan, something he's not telling her. And then Lissa comes in with this plate, and Evie recognizes it for the piece of sky that was in the monster's den, like way, way back earlier in the book. And Evie realizes they need to take this back and make the sky whole in that section. And she knows that her mom is in there. And so they go back and they put this sky back in place. And she's like, my mother is alive. She's just not human. She's a wishing star. Can you put this sky back in place and bring the wishing star down to me? And he does it. And then they have her mom. Their mom sees Gideon. It's a nice reunion. And then Evie's talking about her having that, like the star fruit that makes you almost die. And Gideon fesses up. He's like, you lived and I didn't get the antidote to you in time. Like, I'm sorry I failed you, but Evie's like, that doesn't make sense. There's only one cure. And then Gideon's like, remember, there's two. And then she remembers that Tristan kind of like barely brushed her hand when she was dead, and he was like mentally ordering her to come back to him. Like, he brought her back to life. And then we end on this like line that we've kind of repeated throughout the book, beware the wrath of a kind heart. And that's like basically the end. We have a little epilogue. By the way, there's this like malevolent guard girl named Keely who seems to be hitting it off with Gideon, and they're talking. And then Gideon's looking at Renedon's story. And this is why I think this, because, okay, again, the person who saves the magic lands will take Fate's younglings well in hand. That's the Gouvray's kid. When Fate and Starlight magic fall together, the land will belong to you forever. But beware the unmasked villain and their malevolent dark, for nothing is more dangerous than a blackened good heart. It hits Gideon, where he's like, the villain wasn't the only one who had his mask taken off that day. It was also Evie. And that's the end of the book. So, thinking through this, Evie is the villain. Right? She's the new villain in this story. So she's going to have to be the one to fulfill the prophecy with whatever rainbow magic that she has. We never covered that, by the way. I want us to come back to that. I do love the way this story is being set up. For me, this is more about the characters than anything else. Like, I just love Tristan and Evie. They're so cute. I'm so excited that the next book is like, it's almost here, because I really want to know. I just want to see them get together. They're so cute. That's all I have to say. I feel like I've been talking forever. What was your favorite part? Because mine was probably the tea party is just adorable. Like, it comes to mind. Anything with Kingsley as well is a favorite part for me. Anytime the villain gets flustered by Evie is a favorite part for me. Please like this video if you liked it. Click subscribe if you want to talk about more book stuff. My name's Katelyn. Thanks for watching. Bye.